How are we doing, everybody? I'm really looking forward to this interview because, look, Jim Ratcliffe and INEOS, they are one of the front runners to become Manchester United's new owners in this sort of takeover saga. Will it be them? How good would they be? Well, that's what we want to talk about today because I'm joined by Luke Entwhistle, who is the senior editor at Get French Football News, because I want to speak to Luke about INEOS's ownership of Nice. How good has it been? What have they got right? What have they done wrong? How ambitious have they been? What's been the reaction? This interview will help you fully understand, I hope anyway, exactly how the INEOS ownership of Nice has gone. So, Luke, thank you so much for joining me today, man. How you doing?
No, not bad. Thank you very much for having me on. Anyway, it's yeah, obviously a big topic in the Manchester United community. I imagine with well, of course, the other one in the run-in is another Ligue 1 owner. So yeah, so eyes on French football at the minute, I suppose, for all Manchester United fans.
Absolutely. And I think for a lot of United fans, they look towards the INEOS ownership of Nice and Lausanne from the outside looking in, that it hasn't gone well. That how can they possibly be considered good owners of Manchester United? Because look what's happened at Nice. If I can ask you, in the very beginning, with the INEOS takeover of Nice, was it something that was totally welcomed by fans? Was it something that was totally welcomed by the club? But what were the circumstances when INEOS came in?
Yeah, I mean, the club weren't necessarily very choosy. I mean, there'd been a taste of success in a few years prior to that with they had three top four finishes in the 6 years prior to Ratcliffe joining. But, you know, it wasn't huge success. So obviously when you hear that there's a British billionaire who's interested in buying you out, obviously there's a lot of optimism and it was welcomed. You know, there's no kind of counter movement to their arrival at the Allianz Riviera. So it was seen as wholly positive. I mean, investment, especially in the quantities that INEOS have brought to Nice, is always welcomed. And you know, for example, in this season alone, they spent 100 million euros, which is far outweighs what most Ligue 1 clubs are spending. You know, there are reasons behind that. Obviously, PSG spend more than anyone else, but lots of French clubs have kind of remodeled and changed their perspective and changed their strategies. But Nice are one of the highest spenders, which is what the fans wanted and what they expected. I mean, how that translates on the pitch is maybe where there's a little bit of disappointment. But yeah, at the start, it was definitely welcomed. Jim Ratcliffe talks a good game. He lives in Monaco. He loves the region. He really bigged that up when he was buying the club, saying, "Look, I live in this region. I love this region. I love this club." And that discourse really hit, I think, with the Nice fan base.
Well, obviously, from a similar discourse for United fans, he was a man who grew up 10 miles from Old Trafford. So I suppose it's going to be a similar sort of conversation, although the fact that he owns a season ticket at Chelsea doesn't sit well with a lot of United fans, and I can understand that. In terms of ambition, then, what sort of ambition have INEOS shown as owners of Nice since the very beginning? You said there was 3 top 4 finishes in the 6 years before they came in. This summer they spent 100 million. What sort of ambition has been laid out at Nice from INEOS, and have they followed through on that so far? Have there's been like, or have there been false promises anyway?
False promises, maybe, but not for lack of or for want of desire, I suppose, or for want of ambition. I mean, they this year, following their attempts to buy Chelsea last April, there were a few communiques that came out from the club that came directly from INEOS, directly from Sir Jim Ratcliffe, who stated once again the ambition that they want to challenge PSG, that they want to be challenging for the title year in, year out, that they want to be in Europe, that they want to be in the Champions League. And that is a stated desire. Even when they were looking to take over Chelsea, they're saying, look, maybe we're wanting to move away and we're wanting to buy this other club, but this is not to the detriment of what we want to do here with Nice. So that's kind of the stated ambition. It's to be always in the top 2 and it's to be challenging for titles. But the reality is it's not that. And it's been they haven't really managed to consistently even get in Europe, which is achieved by the top 5 places. That'll change not next season, but the season after. But it's not really happened for them. There's been a couple of 5th place finishes this year. They were in the Conference League after finishing 5th last year. That was a very disappointing season. That looked like the year that the INEOS project had finally found its feet. You had Fournier, who'd been there for many years. He'd been there prior to their arrival, but they brought in Galtier, which is a huge sign of ambition and showed the attractiveness of the Nice project, because he's left Lille, who have just won the title, to go to Nice, who weren't anywhere near winning the title. And yeah, you've got Christophe Galtier, who's of course, now at PSG. So that was a real sign of ambition and a sign of where the club was going to be. And you know, they were second for large parts of last season, and then it was just this insane drop off from January, and they end up finishing fifth. So they get into the Conference League this year. It wasn't the greatest campaign. They get knocked out at at the Allianz Riviera, so at home, a game that for once Ratcliffe was attending. He doesn't attend too many at the Allianz Riviera, but he was at that one. So there's ambition for sure. There's expenditure. There's money being pumped into the club, but it's not necessarily reaping the rewards that the Nice fans would like and maybe the ownership would expect.
And I think that would tie into my next question, is saying, right, so if the ambition is there and the finances are there, then where is the disconnect? Would you say that INEOS and Sir Jim Ratcliffe, because a big thing for Manchester United fans is structure behind the scenes, and that's something that's been terrible at our club for a long time. And again, they look at Nice and they look at, we'll speak about Dave Brailsford in a little bit. We can speak about Bob Ratcliffe as well, who's been installed, I think, by Jim's sort of like that. Is he the chairman?
Bob is kind of, he was kind of left in the summer. There was an audit by Dave who came in, and there's been a big reshuffling this year, which I think is wholly positive, but you won't see the results of that in the near future. Well, in the medium and long term, you'll see the rewards of that, but not yet, that's for sure.
Yeah. So what would be your sort of remarks on the footballing structure that's existed under INEOS at Nice from day one? Because as I said, if the money's there and it has been there and the ambition has been there, then where's the disconnect been?
Yeah, I mean, football is a story of delegation, really, and good delegation and delegating to the right people. And I think that's where the error is. You know, that's where their errors would lie, I think. I mean, Julien Fournier, who's the sporting director, as well as Jean-Pierre Rivet, who is more of an honorary president, more of a front for the club and you know, an image for the fans. I think, you know, they've both stayed, they both preceded Ratcliffe. They were supposed to leave, but ultimately didn't. They both stayed. So really, there wasn't a lot done with the behind the scenes elements. Of course, INEOS are in and they bring in their own people. They brought in Bob specifically, who came into the club and was there for many years. But yeah, I mean, there wasn't a great deal of change. And Fournier has his detractors in France. Of course, he left in the summer. But it feels as though they didn't really put their stamp on the behind the scenes at this club for many years. And I think, you know, there's been a turning point this year. They've appointed Florence Zolfi, who, I mean, probably in the UK, people are following what's happening with RC Lens, and Lens are in third. This is a team that were promoted to Ligue 1 just 3 years ago. And Zolfi has been completely, you know, responsible for the recruitment at that club. He's left Lens mid-season to join Nice. And it feels like, you know, that's a good appointment. You know, he's responsible for bringing people like Lois Appendis to the club, for example, who he's someone who is very highly sought after and very highly spoken of. So there hasn't been a lot of movement behind the scenes until this season. And I think maybe that's partly where there has been an issue in the fact that they've not really put their mark on it and they've not made the changes behind the scenes necessary to have that success. But there's also an element of the actual strategy itself, which once again, that's about delegation. It's about Fournier. It's about the kind of the holistic strategy in terms of recruitment. And I mean, whilst most French clubs, like for example Monaco, are going for a, you know, scouting the market for young players and wanting to sell them on for high value, and, you know, really focusing on the academy, which is you know, something that Ligue 1 clubs focus on. You know, it's called the League of Talents over here. Nice haven't really followed that strategy. I mean, there's been players like, for example, former Man United player Morgan Schneiderlin, who came over, and there's some of the players like Ross Barkley, Aaron Ramsey, Nicolas Pepe, Joe Bryan, you know, all these players from the Premier League. That this is not really the type of profile that other French teams are going after, and it's not really the strategy or the model that other French clubs are using. And there's also that kind of disconnect that I think is also at least partially responsible for the lack of success at Nice in the recent years.
Well, that kind of leads into my next question then. It kind of revolves around to Dave Brailsford, because as far as I know, I'm sure you can correct me if I'm wrong, Dave Brailsford and Jim Ratcliffe have obviously got their friendship through the Team Sky, which INEOS took over, and it's sort of like the cycling routes where they became friends. And Brailsford was brought into INEOS, to Nice by INEOS, as you say, to do some like an behind the scenes audit, and so like these are the performance things that you need to improve to get your team from X to X. Is if Dave, has his position changed? Dave Brailsford, has he got more responsibility? Like, what is his role inside? Is he still there at Nice?
So this is something that it's always hard to know exactly who's around and about at Nice. I mean, he came in to do this audit. He's involved with INEOS, and INEOS are very intrinsically linked to what is happening at Nice. Even they have cyclists, and they've got this kind of model, this idea at Nice that you need to integrate elements from other sport into the project in order to get small competitive advantages over teammates. So you'll see high profile British cyclists just turn up at Nice's training centre from now and then. So I think it's sometimes hard to distinguish exactly where the lines between INEOS and Nice are drawn. He was very, very present there in the summer and earlier in the season. L'Equipe were even reporting that he had a mobile caravan that was actually situated at the club's training ground for many weeks and months, where he was basically living on site as he carried out this audit and carried out all these changes behind the scenes. So he's very involved in that. He was involved in bringing, for example, Ian Moody in over the summer, which was an appointment that is now perceived quite negatively, shall we say, because he was responsible for that summer recruitment. But yeah, Dave was very, very involved, at least in the summer. It feels as though maybe he's more over towards INEOS. I mean, his official role is still the INEOS Director of Sport. And if you go on the OG Nice website, you won't find him in their kind of hierarchical structure. So I think he's he's very much an INEOS, but he's very much looking at maximising and gaining competitive advantage in different sports, including football with Nice.
And going back to the summer strategy, because that was quite a diversion from what Nice had been trying previously. Was how's that sort of been viewed at by journalists, by fans? Because it kind of felt like a bit of a Hail Mary. It was like, what was it, Aaron Ramsey? It was all sorts of weird, old school. It kind of smacked of a lack of a plan, really, from the outside looking in.
Yeah, lack of plan, lack of imagination, lack of scouting, lack of many things, really. I mean, yeah, just to name a few, Nicola Pepe, who hasn't really worked out, especially in the second part of the season. It's got a bit of an injury issue. Ross Barkley, who's barely played. Aaron Ramsey is one that has paid off. He's been great under Didier Digard, not so much under Lucien Favre, who left midway through the season. Then you've got Joe Bryan, brought in on loan from Fulham, who's barely played a minute, is barely in the squad. He was supposed to replace Melvin Bard, but really you looked at them and Melvin Bard wasn't really perceived as being good enough. And was Joe Bryan a step up? Probably not. And then you've got Mads Bech Sorensen, who they brought in on loan from Brentford, who didn't even play a minute before returning to the club in January. So that was
very successful then.
Yeah, very much a miss. But there are a few bright spots. I mean, they got in Sofiane Diop from Monaco, who is a prospect. He's 21, and there's an idea that he would do better than he has, but he has had injury issues since arriving. But he's seen as someone who was probably a smart signing, as was Gerson Laborde, who's a proven goal scorer in Ligue 1. So those were kind of a few bright spots, but generally it was perceived very poorly over here. It looked like a very kind of Anglo-centric approach that maybe wasn't necessarily suited to the style of Ligue 1, to the difficulties, to the challenges of Ligue 1, and that is so proven to be the case. I mean, there was Favre who, as I say, has now left the club, but he was seemingly very, very unhappy with some of that recruitment and suggested on numerous occasions that he hadn't been consulted. I was in a press conference where Favre was asked, do you see Ross Barkley as more of a 6 or more of a number 8? And he says, well, I've been told he's a number 8, as if, I've not been consulted on this. Equally with Nicola Pepe, you could kind of see that he's been shoehorned in to his system, and he's actually been played centrally because of the fact that, well, Nicola Pepe doesn't really do the defensive work, so he's a bit of a liability if you put him on the wing, and he doesn't have that positional awareness to be able to kind of be between the lines out of possession. So he was shoehorning these players in that he clearly hadn't chosen, that he maybe didn't know much about. He didn't even know Gerson Laborde's age, and seemed quite surprised by how old he was in a press conference. So all of these things kind of paint a picture of great discord behind the scenes. I mean, this is Ian Moody who carried out this recruitment, and it's not been perceived very positively. And I think that Nice's season, which has been unsuccessful, I think we could certainly say has been very much attributed to the fact that this recruitment in the summer was not up to the standard.
Is that something that has sort of put a little bit of a cloud over the INEOS ownership as far as how it's perceived, because for United fans that would be massive alarm bells. Because again, if you're looking at Qatari ownership of PSG and the sort of the control that comes from above, that's not something that any manager should ever have. A manager should be able to decide who he signs. A manager should be able to decide who he controls. And if it's sort of the powers that be that are having those decisions, then that's a ticking time bomb.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was an idea that this was quite a chaotic summer. There were specific circumstances that played into this. So Julien Fournier was expected to leave, but only after the end of the transfer window. He infamously did not get on well at all with Christophe Galtier. But he was supposed to leave in September, instead left right at the start of the transfer window. So left him in a real sticky situation. Then Galtier left, so you're then without sporting director and a manager, and then you're having to pick up the pieces. So there were circumstances which kind of accumulated to make this transfer window what it was. Ian Moody was a stopgap, but ultimately not the right stopgap, probably not the right profile to be able to find the types of players within the French market that would work in Ligue 1 and would help them achieve their objectives potentially. But yeah, there were a certain set of circumstances, but yeah, problems of delegation again, and things seem on the right track now with the appointment of Gisolfi, Bocquet, of Jean-Claude Blanc as well. I mean, loads of people have been brought in behind the scenes.
So can you, if I could ask you there, what positions have they been brought into? So it's all been changed behind the scenes, right?
Yeah. So now we've got Jean-Claude Blanc. He is now the CEO of the INEOS project. Okay. So he is a huge one. So he's been seen, especially in the French media, as a huge coup. He was at PSG and is very much appreciated. Bocquet, who's come in as a kind of a director general, he said he's kind of like the Lionel Messi of sports business. And Nasser Al-Khelaifi, PSG, said, described him as absolutely fantastic. And I mean, we've seen all of the various crises that have engulfed PSG since his departure just a couple of months ago. So it kind of paints a picture of a guy who is really holding it together. So yeah, that's Bocquet, that's Jean-Claude Blanc. And then you've got Florent Gisolfi, who is this very, very young, very, very renowned already, despite his, being very young, sporting director who's now tying things together, who hasn't really yet made his first managerial appointment, because when Favre went, it was mid-season, and they decided to go Didier Digard, who had a brilliant start, who's tailed off slightly, but I think the overall, impression is that it's been a positive recruitment of Didier Digard. He'll probably leave in the summer, and they'll probably find someone else, so that'll be Gisolfi's first proper appointment. But he's already involved in a couple of decent signings in January in Terem Moffi, who is very much coveted in the Premier League, and Youssef Ndiaye, who's a good buy from the Turkish league as well. So there's already positive signs, probably, sprouts of growth, I'd say, at Nice with these appointments. That, as I say, there's a lot of envy towards Nice and the personnel that they've managed to bring in the past weeks and months.
And so how many years has it been now since the INEOS takeover?
So it's been 2019. So it's taken them 3-4 years to really have this reshuffle. Yeah.
So you would probably say that going into this summer, that the structure behind the scenes at Nice is the strongest it's been since INEOS took over.
Yeah, undoubtedly. Yeah, it's the strongest it's been since they took over. I think that this is the first football club, along with Lausanne, that they've really owned. Maybe it's it's a learning curve, and maybe from that they'll learn that it's important to have their men in from the start and start to reconstruct things rather than kind of go for a laissez-faire kind of just let things stay as they were when we arrived kind of approach, which is kind of the approach that was used when they arrived at Nice, and maybe they'll learn from that. But yeah, at the minute it feels as though the foundations have finally been laid for success at Nice.
Well, that's good for Nice. It's pretty bad that it took them 3-4 years to sort of get there, but I mean, I suppose it is difficult. I've never run a football club, and I mean, I need to, again, I'd like, just as much as I'm enjoying chatting to you, I'd love to be able to speak to somebody who's got experience of INEOS's ownership of Lausanne, and to sort of see if there's any sort of anything they learned from that they maybe tried to take into Nice, but it still didn't quite work. I mean, it's good that Nice are in the strongest position that they have been in 4 years, so they're not on the way down. It's just been it's been a tumultuous way up.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the standings, they're 8th at the minute, so it feels as though they're on the way down. But really, this has been a season of transition for them. As you say, it's been a while since they took over, but this has been a season of transition. And next season, we'll maybe see them kind of moving their way back up. In terms of Lausanne, I mean, obviously they're in the second division. They're doing quite well. They're in third at the minute. But yeah, there's maybe not as many synergies between the two clubs as you would potentially expect for a multi-club model. You don't see too much movement between the clubs.
You mentioned the multi-club model there. Like, what's the perception been in around Nice, in around any journalists or fans around INEOS potentially buying Manchester United, and what that would mean for Nice? Is it something that they go, "Well, sod this," or is it something that's kind of accepted as part of modern football?
Well, yeah, it's a cultural thing in France. France has a bit of a recent history of multi-club models. I mean, you've got Troyes, who look like they're actually going to be relegated to Ligue 2, who are part of Man City. They're part of the City group. I'm sure that's to the delight of Manchester United fans, that they're almost certain to go down probably this weekend. But also, lots of clubs here are part of multi-club models, like Monaco, who have Cercle Bruges, whilst there's also talk of Chelsea about Strasbourg. So being part of a multi-club model is kind of seen as part and parcel of the running nowadays of a modern football club, I'd say, in France, and that is evolving slowly. I think with that in mind, the reaction has not been as negative as perhaps you would think. It's been welcomed by some. I mean, Jean-Pierre River, the president, went so far as to say, if Nice are the second club after Manchester United, I don't have any problem with that. Whilst the fans, there's not been any kind of coordinated mass movement against it. The echoes are relatively mixed. Overall, there isn't an air of worry. There's question marks about what it means for the club and potential future European qualifications and whether that's possible. Obviously, Alexander Seferin saying things like, maybe that will be allowed in the future, which kind of eases those concerns. But no, there's certainly not mass resistance to it. And some people, many, are even welcoming a potential future partnership with Manchester United.
Okay, well, that's interesting. Just a couple more questions I'd like to ask you. I want to focus on the fans for a little bit. Have there been any sort of flashpoints or any, I'm not saying like full-on protests that's been going on Manchester United, but have there been any sort of anger and discontent from fans towards the INEOS ownership at any point?
There was at the time of the bid for Chelsea. Nothing, mass or very organised particular, but lots of discontent kind of aired on the social media channels, shall we say, and they weren't very happy with that. That forced INEOS to come out with a statement, which was actually very, very well received. So, 1-0 to the communications department kind of thing. That was, they were saying, this is the point at which the comment about wanting to consistently challenge Paris Saint-Germain came out, and that was very, very well received. But yeah, not really many flashpoints. I think that there is maybe a desire and a kind of underlying desire for Sir John Ratcliffe to be a little bit more present. He doesn't attend that many matches. He always attends the match in Monaco, 20 kilometers down the road, because he's a Monaco resident. He lives in Monaco. But he's not really a regular at the Allianz Riviera. He went to the Basel match, which ultimately ended in defeat last month, but yeah, not there too often, and he's not very present in the media either. So I think there's a desire maybe to see him a bit more, but there's certainly not any kind of mass movement against him. Let's put it that way.
Okay, that's interesting to know. If you were to maybe, in your own opinion here, identify probably the biggest mistake or the biggest problem that's existed at Nice under the INEOS ownership, you think, well, they could have done that differently. What would you identify as a thing that they got wrong?
Maybe not installing their own strategy, their own men or women in the positions when they first arrived. I think that's maybe an issue, because we're at this point now where I say that I think that this is now we've got a solid foundation, but it's taken a long time to get there. And I think that has maybe been a problem, is that they saw Fournier and saw Jean-Pierre River, and rather than changing the project, they just kind of chose a status option. On the other hand, you've got Lyon, who've just been taken over by John Textor, who has just removed, quite controversially, I'd say, Jean-Michel Aulas as president. He's now kind of an honorary president, but there will be changes. Cheroux will be going, Ponceau will be going. These kind of all these people behind the scenes are going, and they just kind of decided to keep things as they were. And yeah, I think there have been errors in recruitment. I think there's been a change of strategy away from youthful players, away from looking at more niche divisions, and towards looking at the Premier League, looking at bigger divisions, looking at players who have got experience, like your Morgan Schneidlins, who have come in, like what we saw throughout the summer, it's just not really worked out, and it's not the way that the French division has really gone in the past few years, and they've been kind of fighting against this kind of this wave of change, I suppose, in some ways. So I think the error has been in not changing things and maybe having a strategy that was more conducive to success potentially in the Premier League than it was in the French division. But yeah, I'd say that's been the biggest issue. I mean, there's been lots of desire there, lots of ambition there. You can't criticise him for lack of trying. There are of course the financial fair play constraints, but there's been a lot of money put in, maybe just misallocated. Let's put it that way.
Well, that will definitely scream alarm bells to United fans, because when it comes to how much money we've wasted in this last 10 years because of lack of structure, lack of correct management, saying that is the one thing that we cannot afford to do. But Luke, I've learned a lot. I've definitely learned a lot. I really, really appreciate your time today, man. Where can anybody catch you if they wanted to find out any more on Nice or Jim Ratcliffe?
So yeah, I'm on Get French Football News. You can follow me on Twitter at Luke Entwhistle. I'm also on Monaco Live doing all of their sports really, and yeah, those are the main ones. I do little bits and bobs here and there as well, but mostly on GFFN for everything Nice, for everything just French football in general.
Wicked. Well, yeah, you live in Nice, right? So I'm guessing it's delightful weather down there right now.
Yeah, I mean, you can,
coming in your window.
Yeah, you can see it streaming in, can't you? A little bit. Yeah, it's glorious down there. It's been about 25 degrees for the past week, so
brilliant.
So can't complain.
So happy for you. So happy for you.
I'm from Bolton, so I deserve it.
I've got a little bit of sun there. Are you from Bolton? Yeah, you suffered enough. You suffered enough. All right,
exactly.
I'll take it all back. Look, appreciate your time today, man. And yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sam. Cheers.